22. In the figure, point P is the circumcenter of triangle JKL. Which of the following statements are not always true? Now, I have to admit, we have not talked about circumcenters yet, but there's a few things you need to know. A circumcenter is the intersection of the three perpendicular bisectors of a triangle. So on this triangle, however, the perpendicular bisectors are P, Y, PZ, and PX. Those are your perpendicular bisectors. And as you can see, they all have P in their name, so that's the meeting spot. So that's why P is the circumcenter. So that's one criteria for a circumcenter. The other criteria of a circumcenter is that it is equidistant to all vertices. So let's add that to our picture. So K is a vertice, so the distance from P to K should get 4 tally marks. And that distance is the same as P to L and P to J. So the circumcenter is equidistant to all vertices, as well as it's the intersection of the perpendicular bisectors. So knowing that information, let's answer the question. It says, which of the following are not always true? In other words, sometimes true or never true. Okay? So number one says PX, right here, one of your perpendicular bisectors, is equal to PY, the other perpendicular bisector. And that's not always true, so let's check that. PJ is equal to PK. And I just told you that is always true. So scratch it off. PK equals PL. Again, that is always true. So let's remove that one. Then angle, the measure of angle PYK equals 90 degrees. PYK is right here, and that is true. Always, because that's my perpendicular bisector. With that being said, the only thing that is not always true is 1. PX is equal to PY. It might be true, but it's not always true. In number 23, it says that P is the circumcenter of ABC now. So which of the following must be true? So we're looking for must be. So in other words, it's always, no matter what. All right, PD, PE, and PF are perpendicular bisectors. That must be true. Yes. Because P is supposed to be the intersection of your perpendicular bisectors. So that must be true if it's a circumcenter. PA is equal to PB. PA represents the distance from the vertex A and the circumcenter. And so same thing with PB. So yes, those must be the same. True. Situation 3 says PE, which is your perpendicular bisector, equals PD, the other perpendicular bisector. That's not always true. And lastly, PC, the distance from C to P, essentially, is equal to PF. PF is the other perpendicular bisector. So that's not always true either. So 1 and 2 were always true. Number 24 says, which picture shows a circumcenter? So you must look at each picture correctly to understand based off of the markings. And based on what I know about circumcenters, again, I know that it's the intersection of all three perpendicular bisectors. And it is the same distance from every vertex. So that means it would be figure 1. Figure 1 is showing that the distance from B to P, from A to P, and from C to P are all equal. All right, now on number 25, it wants us to find the value of x. This gets into Unit 6, which is our most recent unit this semester. We just tested over it. So we know that LM is parallel with QP. We also see a set of vertical angles. So let's mark all the angles congruent that we can. So M alternates with Q, so alternate interior. L with P, again, alternate interior. And then we have our vertical pair. Knowing that, I know that 2x corresponds to 8, and x plus 3 corresponds to 5. If you look at the angle markings, that should help you understand why those correspond. So now that I have my proportion, let's go ahead and cross multiply. So 5 times 2x, that's 10x. And then 8 times x plus 3 would give me 8x plus 24. Now to solve for x, subtract 8x on both sides. You would get 2x equals 24. Then divide by 2. X is equal to 12. My picture got shifted down. On 26, it says IJ is parallel with MN. M is the midpoint of IQ, and N is the midpoint of JQ. Find X. So let's look at the picture. Sorry, it wasn't supposed to be shifted. So IJ is parallel to MN, and the distance from I to M is the same as from M to Q, because M is the midpoint. So if the whole thing is 24, that means each part is 12. N is the midpoint on this side, so J to N is the same as Q to N. We don't know how much, but we know they're the same. But we have more than enough information to correctly set up our proportions. On this situation, it would be best to redraw two separate triangles. Label them. The first one, the big one, is I, J, Q. The little one is M, N, Q. And then I would relabel all the given information. So IJ is x plus 2. IQ is 24. MN, x minus 4. MQ is 12. So now you can see the corresponding parts. So x plus 2 corresponds with x minus 4, and set it equal to 24 over 12. So now we can cross multiply to solve for x. So 12 times x plus 2 is going to give me 12x plus 24, and that's equal to 24x minus 48. Sorry, 96. Minus 96. 48 is by 2. All right. Next, I would subtract 12x from both sides. So 24 is equal to 12x minus 96. Add 96 to both sides. So you would have 120 is equal to x. 12x, I mean. Divide by 12, x is equal to 10. And let me double check the instructions to make sure all I needed to find was x. Yes, good. So we're done. 27 wants us to find the height of the tree to the nearest tenth. First things first, the side that represents the girl is broken into feet and inches. So we need to convert it to either both feet or both inches first so that everything is consistent. The easiest thing to do is to convert it to feet actually, because you should recall, just common knowledge, is that 12 inches is equivalent to 1 foot. So if I have 6 inches, how many feet do I have? Well, I have half, or 0.5 feet. So the side that's pointing to the girl is 5.5 feet. Our job is to find the height of the tree, so that's going to be x. So x is proportional with 5.5 as 10 is proportional to 2. Now cross multiply, I would get 2x is equal to 55. And then divide by 2, x is equal to 27.5. And it said to the nearest tenth, and tenth is one place behind the decimal. So I am finished. Okay, okay. Number 28. Mr. Rao swam across the river and stopped at spot A. His tube is directly across the river from him, but 17.2 meters from the pier. So this is 17.2 right there. The pier is 42.5 meters from the forest. So this pier is 42.5. Here's your forest. With your trees. There's my tree. All right. The campsite at spot B is 75.6 meters from the river's edge. So 75.5 or 75.6 is this side from B to the river. Estimate the width of the river. So the width of the river is represented by this side of the smaller triangle. So our proportion would be x is to 75.6 as 17.2 is to 42.5. So that would be 42.5x is equal to 75.6 times 17.2 1,300.32. And now we're going to divide by 42.5. And it said to the nearest meter. So the 0.5 will round it up to approximately 31 meters. So x is approximately 31 meters. Number 29. Label each statement as true or false. A segment that connects the midpoints of two sides of a triangle is called the midsegment. That is true. Again, we just talked about that. So you need to be familiar with that definition of a midsegment again and what the midsegment does. So connects the midpoints of two sides. A midsegment of a triangle is 1/3 the length of one side of the triangle. False. It is 1/2 of the side that it is parallel to. A midsegment of a triangle is parallel to one side of the triangle. That's true. A midsegment of a triangle intersects a vertex of the triangle. That is false. So again, to remember about a midsegment, it connects midpoints. One, it's parallel to one side, and it's going to be half the distance of the side that it's parallel to. So for number 30, we're talking about midsegments again. And it tells you that DE is a midsegment. So what is not true? So we're looking for not true. Okay. So DE is equal to half of AC. Is DE being the midsegment half the size of AC? That is true. So we mark that one off. AC is equal to 2 times the amount of DE. That is true as well. So let's cross that off. CE is equal to BE. That is true also. And you know what I should have done in the beginning, and I apologize, is should have taken care of that. So let's mark these congruent because E is a midpoint and these two are congruent because D is a midpoint. That's why it's a midsegment, DE. Okay, so maybe that also helps you answer the rest of the questions. AB, A to B, which is the whole side here, is equal to CB. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. E says AD is equal to DB. That is true. So the answer was D. Says find X. So, as you can see, based on the tally marks on both sides of this triangle, X represents a midsegment. So X is equal to half of 35, and half of 35 is 17.5. So again, please remember what a midsegment does. Sorry, my stuff got distorted. The next two questions come from spherical geometry, which I know we sort of touched upon real briefly, but you got to remember a couple questions because there will be some on the final exam. I'm sorry, but there is. So for number 32, remember this question specifically. That's a big hint. And remember this answer. It says, what type of triangle is impossible to draw on a flat surface, but not on a sphere? The answer is equilateral, right triangle. Equilateral, right triangle. 33. Choose the corresponding statement in spherical geometry for the following property of plane Euclidean geometry. So again, we are studying Euclidean geometry, and again, we only touched on spherical for a little bit. So when we studied our triangles, we remember that the sum of the interior angles is 180 degrees. However, if you were to draw a triangle on a sphere or globe, think of a globe or a ball, the sum of the angles is more than 180. We don't know exactly how much, but we just know that it is more. So keep that in mind. So again, remember these two questions specifically and their answers. I am giving you a big hint. For number 34, it says line T bisects DR at point M. You might want to draw this illustration to understand, so I'll put it down here at the bottom where I have some room. So DR is my segment, and point M is in the middle, so draw my tallies. And then I have line T going through M. Okay. So then it says segment DM is congruent to segment MR because of blank. So it's looking for one of our properties that we might have talked about at the beginning of the year when we first did proofs. As you can see, this is a proof written in paragraph form, so we're writing the reason on this blank. And again, our reason should be a definition, a theorem, a postulate, anything of that nature. So for this case, since we definitely use the word bisect initially, we should be using that word in our reason as well. So that's a major hint as also. So our reason will be the definition of segment bisector. If they had said midpoint, then we would use definition of midpoint. So look at what they state in the proof before you write your reason and use some of those similar phrases in your reason. Okay? Then it says, therefore, the measurement of DM is equal to the measurement of MR. And that is because that's the definition of congruent. The only thing that changed is I dropped the segment bar and the congruent symbol, and now I'm referring to their measurements are equal. And that's, again, the definition of congruent. Next, it reads, and if MR is equal to AB, we can conclude that DM is also equal to AB because of the answer being the transitive property of equality. So we had DM equals MR, so notice there's MR. then we stated MR equals AB. So MR repeats. So whenever you have that repeat in the middle, you take the two ends and put them together. That's the transitive property. So I like to refer to it as delete the repeat. And the last question, thank the Lord, we are almost done. Says the TI is congruent to TI. I should have the segment bar at the top. Again, another typo. I'm sorry. This is an example of which property. Since you have the same thing on both sides, it is always the reflexive property. And this time it's the reflexive property of congruence, because it uses the congruent symbol. Alrighty folks, this concludes the tutorial for your final exam review. Good luck on your test.